it's so wonderful to have you all be a part of Prime Time for Women's 10-week series, Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom. Of course, I hope you enjoy tonight's presenters. We have Jane Helm with us again, and also Peggy Raley-Ward. They're going to be sharing their knowledge and their stories with us. But I also hope that when you join us tonight, and if you watch this video, that you do it with a friend, because this whole idea of Prime Time for Women is connecting women because of the health benefits that are associated with positive social interactions. So every time you take time to chit chat with your girlfriend, to be in a positive relationship, you're actually creating a way to heal your body and reduce inflammation in your body and improve your mental well-being as well. So believe it or not, every time you reach out, it's good for you. I wanted to say that tonight is a beautiful night here in Hagerstown. It's still light outside, which is lovely. And it's a beautiful night in March. And it is a Tuesday night in National Women History Month and National Women's Month. And so it's my pleasure to welcome two women who are knowledgeable experts in their fields to celebrate their contributions. And I would encourage all of you to make sure that you reach out to and honor the women that support your journey and enrich your lives. So I'm going to start tonight with Peggy Raley-Ward. She is the founder and proprietor of Nassau Valley Vineyard.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. And she is full of firsts. And so, Peggy, rather than do an introduction, I thought maybe we could just sort of have you tell a little bit about your story from World Traveler and how you came back to Delaware.
So, well, first of all, thank you for having me this evening.
My pleasure.
That you reached out, and we're always happy to tell people the incredible story of how Delaware's first winery started. I was born and raised here in Delaware and come from a very heavy agricultural tradition. We were all forced labor as children. That's the only reason they bothered to have any of us. And needless to say, when the time came, I ran screaming from the room. And off I went to the big city, but whilst I was a poor, struggling college student, I needed a job. And I ended up going to work for what was at that time the world's largest consumer wine education organization. The organization was known by its French name, Les Amis du Vin, or that translates to the Friends of Wine. And we also had their sister publication, the Friends of Wine magazine. So really, as luck would have it for me, when I went to work for those lovely folks, I was not legally old enough to consume in the United States of America. So they ended up sending me to the European Bureau office in Bordeaux. Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody had to be willing to take one for the team. I said,
right, somebody had to do it.
So I ended up spending 5.5 years with that incredible organization. And I ended up falling hopelessly in love with the wine business. But it certainly was a far jump from where I started, and that was here in coastal Delaware. As I said, truly, we were forced labor as children. My father at one point raised 1 million chickens a year. We had 400 head of beef cattle. He raised alfalfa hay that he sold straight off the field for racehorse people. So the protein content in hay has to be really special for those, you have these beautiful, incredible athlete animals that people have spent tens of thousands of dollars on. You're not going to feed them bad food.
Right.
So when we were sent to the hayfield, you had to be mindful of the quality of the product that was on the end result of that, which, no kid at, the day we turned 10, that was my father's birthday present to us. We got to go to work.
Well, it's funny that you say that. When my kids were little, when they were 5, they got their own alarm clock. And I made it this big whopping deal that they now get to wake themselves up. And thank God I don't have to wake any more cranky kids up. And they fell for it. It worked.
I'm not sure that would work entirely, Bernadette, if they knew what was on the other end, if it was the hayfield.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Literally from dawn to dusk. And if you argued about it, my father used to say, look, kid, I made one of you. I can make another one in a heartbeat. So it's up to you. It's all about attitude here.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
But
you came back to Delaware eventually.
I did. So
about that.
I left, I'm ostensibly speaking, I left sort of early, or earlier than most people do, although I was here in the summers because I went to boarding school, as we've been chatting about. I went to Mercersburg Academy. And so in reality, I kind of left when I was 13, although I came home for summers. So when it was time to just go and leave, I went to American University in Washington, D.C., and I was a drama major with a double Spanish lit, English lit minor. I thought my great calling in life at that point was to translate all of the great Spanish theater of the world. And, you know, I inadvertently fell into the wine business. I had seen an ad for an editorial assistant and also somebody doing photography. I was doing a lot of photography at the time. And, you know, I had an English minor and I spoke Spanish fluently. So when I ended up in this wine business, at the Les Amis du Vin in the magazine, it didn't matter that I didn't know anything about wine. They just sort of sucked me up and said, we've got several places to put you.
We'll teach you wine, but we need your language skills.
They did. And I'm very aware, I'm very cognitive of the fact that very few people get to enter this industry the way I did. It was really charmed and very blessed. I got to learn this industry from some of the people who truly are the greatest experts in the world. Or were at the time. Most of them are gone now. And the organization that I worked for, Les Amis du Vin, was an organization that had been founded in the early 1960s to pioneer wine education in America. It was, really, they were the folks that took wine tasting from being a glorified cocktail party to being an educational process where you had speakers brought in and people were doing wines and flights in front of them so that they could really discern what differences were, and it became an educational experience. And someone that tagged into our organization was the great Bordelaise winemaker, Alexis Lachine from Chateaubriand-Lachine, because he felt America needed to be educated. This gets into a whole crazy historical thing, but what happened to America and wine is a direct result of prohibition in this country.
Right. You know, I feel like we should have you come back and do a whole history just on that. Would you be willing to do that?
I would absolutely love to, but
there's a
lot of history with wine. There's a 1,000-year history of wine.
And we could really do like maybe even if you had some slides or that would just be so fascinating. But tonight, I wanted you to talk a little bit, especially because it's National Women's History Month, about how you came back to start this winery with your dad and found out that Delaware state law was like, no, it's not happening. So you drafted legislation and lobbied the General Assembly. So tell us about that.
Well, that was a very long process as well. So at one point when I was home for a visit, it occurred to me that it was very strange Delaware had no wineries. Our soils here, especially in the southern part of the state, are very well suited to grape growing. And our climate, the climatic influence of the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, are very temperate. We have a temperate growing climate anyway. Cold for us is freezing. You know, I mean, that's what we consider terribly cold, and we don't get a lot of snow. It's not severe weather. You have to worry about vine damage and winter injury when you are in climates that sustain temperatures of 0 or below. That you don't have that in Delaware.
You don't have that.
So it just knowing what I knew at that point, it was very bizarre with all of these conducive conditions that no one had ever done it. And so after globetrotting for a long time for Les Amis, I woke up one morning and I had to look in a phone book to figure out what city I was in, because I was traveling for our chapters all around the country. This was obviously at the end of my time with them. And I said, this is insane. You know, something's got to give. So I did move home, and my father and I began this process. We started planting grapevines.
Can I ask you a question? Was it your idea or your dad's idea to plant grapevines?
Well, he always tells people that the story of the winery is a story about fishing and it involved bait. You know, he wanted his youngest child to come home and stay home. So he used to say to me when I would come home, why do you have to keep running up and down to all these highfalutin vineyards? We could plant a vineyard here. You know, which the first time he said it.
Reeled you in?
Yeah,
Reeled you in?
After I woke up trying to figure out what city I was in, because it had been such a burner. So one of the functions of things I did for Les Amis is, and the reason that we were so popular, especially with European winemakers, was we gave them a direct entree to the American wine consumer. We had 500 chapters of Les Amis du Vin across the US and 67 internationally. So when a great French winemaker or Italian or Spanish winemaker wanted to come to the US, we sent them literally on a tour of our chapters. And if you were a chapter member in South Carolina, or you in Hagerstown, you guys would have monthly meetings. And so all of a sudden we're bringing you the upper echelon of people in the wine world. We're bringing you wine stars for one-on-one tastings in your town or your city.
That's cool.
It was very cool, but sometimes it would get crazy because literally I would just go on this juggernaut and take people from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, and stopping at places in between like Pocatello, Idaho. And, you know, we actually had a great chapter there, but so it made sense to slow down.
Came back to Delaware and could start a winery.
So we planted the vineyard. We planted vines before we realized we couldn't do it.
Okay.
We put thousands of wine grapes in the ground and couldn't do anything with them legally. And so when I went to the state of Delaware initially, and they said, well, you can't, it's a thing within the laws. We're a 3-tier system. What you want to do violates the 3-tier system. I initially lobbied for trying to just get a variance in Delaware's laws. And I spent 2 years just trying to do that. After 2 years of wrestling to create a variance for that, it became abundantly clear to me the only way this state would ever have a winery would be if I changed the state laws. And so in 1991, I carried legislation to the Delaware General Assembly to create farm wineries for the state. We were in and out with the governor's signature in less than 45 days.
So let me just say, this is a little bit of, that's why I wanted to really bring in the National Women's History Month, because I think you created history. I mean, it's amazing what you did. You had that go-to power, and I just wanted to give you a big fat shout out.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've always been a person who doesn't like to hear no,
right.
But what especially bothers me is when people tell you can't do something and they've never tried. Right. I actually did a TED talk on this very subject. My TED talk was just that. Don't say you can't do something if nobody's, don't tell somebody they can't do it if nobody's ever tried.
Can you show us some pictures of your winery?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I would be delighted. So let's go in here. And so there we are, Delaware's first and only award-winning winery.
And that's Lewis, Delaware.
Lewis, Delaware, yes. We are in coastal Delaware, so we are literally about 3.5 miles as the crow flies from the Delaware Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. And this is a nice aerial view of part of the vineyard. This is another one.
Beautiful.
This is the approach if you're driving up, and this is my retail room. I have a History of Wine museum on site. I have 2 event centers because we do weddings, private parties, corporate functions. So the building with the red doors that you're seeing is actually one of my event centers, which for COVID we've been using as a tasting room. We've had to.
When Prime Time for Women takes its field trip, right, Jane? That's where we'll go.
Absolutely. Oh, going the wrong way. Sorry. This is another shot of, we call this Claret Hall. This is one of my event centers. This is Bacchus Grove, which is a big stand of sycamores. That is our outdoor ceremony site for weddings. And it also houses our farmers market from the middle of May until the middle of October. We have a fabulous farmers market on Sundays. We have live music. We have a sangria bar. It's become a very popular hang for everybody on Sunday. We do get a lot of tourist traffic, but locals, it's really become, as I said, a hang for people. They know they can come and have a beautiful afternoon and not have to try to fight the traffic to get to the beach. And it's a lovely spot. This is my other event center, 8,400 square feet. So we can handle events from 20 or 30 people to 350 to 400 people. So this actually just sort of does a quick chronicle of the life cycle of the vine. So of course we don't get a lot of snow here in Southern Delaware, but I always love this picture. This picture is entitled Waiting. The vines are waiting to wake up. And what's ironic is that this was actually a March storm. This was March 24th, about 3 or 4 years ago.
Beautiful.
This is a section of the vineyard. This is what the vineyard looks like after it has been pruned and is ready for spring to spring. And this is, we're past what we call bud break here. We're at about 4 to 5 inches of shoot growth in the vineyard. This is one of my old Cabernet vines. Cabernet and Cab was one of the very first things we planted here. So this vine is about 30, 35 years old. So this goes through what really happens in the growing season, and that is people just assume that a cluster of grapes appears. So this is actually a flower cluster. Although it looks like a little baby bundle of grapes, this is how they start. And it will actually flower. As you can see, it's starting to flower out here. These flower stamens are infinitesimally small. Grapevines are hermaphrodites. They do not need, you don't have male and female plants. They are grapevines within their morphology and in the plant world, they are considered to be one of the most highly intelligent plants there are, because they have figured out how to create both sexes within themselves.
They're complete in themselves.
Yeah, so pollinators, certainly if a pollinator comes through, if a bee comes through the vineyard during during the flowering and fruit set period, they can help, but we are one of the few crops in the world that are not dependent on bees.
Okay.
So you can see again the flowering, and then if flowering is successful, then that little cluster reforms, and then the grapes take their time to grow. These are grapes before they begin ripening. So what we call the ripening period when it starts is veraison. If it's from the French, it means to ripen. So these are now at their full size. This photo is just about the 1st of August, which is when veraison begins. And if everything goes successful, that's what it looks like when it's done. So
that's beautiful.
We grow all vinifera here. We grow Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Merlot, and a little Pinot Grigio. This is vineyard on a harvest day. So the lugs are—
Peggy, can you tell us how many acres of vineyards you have?
So we have just a little over 8. And again, all planted in traditional European varietals.
How many employees do you have? That 10 days?
Not enough.
Not enough. That's what I was thinking.
No, actually, so we still have some of the other family farms and other family businesses. So we can pull help in on harvest days.
Okay.
So this is the photo you're seeing here is we've actually finished this section, and the lugs are laying underneath the vines waiting to be picked up. And these are just some various pictures of harvest. The lugs are picked up and taken to the cellar. And these are all various little post shot.
It's a lot of grapes.
The big burly guy in the blue shirt on the right is my winemaker, Mike. And it's Mike again. This is some grapes going into the crusher. So when we bring the fruit in, we always allow it to lay on the cellar floor. We bring it in and bring temperature down because it's so cold in the wine cellar. So when we bring fruit in, we don't just send it straight in for processing. It goes in, it's all weighed, and then it's allowed to rest so that its core temperature comes down. If you allow fermentation to happen too quickly, you lose all of the nuance of the fruit, and you just get a quick conversion to alcohol. This is Mike doing some barrel filling. This shows you some of this is obviously a little product shot, but this is several of our wines. We're here at the beach, and certainly we gear our wines to the fact that we are where we are. We're in an ag heavy state. So like our Pinot Grigio, our Chard, our Rosé, even our Laurel's Red, which is a lighter red, all pair beautifully with seafood. This is actually, American Wine is a great book by Master of Wine Janice Robinson. And she is just a fearless person in my industry. So
that's who you're celebrating in National Women's History Month?
Yeah, well, so I'm celebrating the fact that Janice Robinson thinks my wines are good enough to put them in her book.
Oh, that's great.
She talks about a lot in great specificity of West Coast, and California and Oregon and Washington State winemakers. But when she does her sweep down the Eastern Seaboard, she names very, very few wineries by name. She talks about regions, and the fact that she makes mention of Nassau Valley Vineyards and says we are making competent and credible wines in little old Delaware is pretty A-okay with me. We are at over 650 medals in international competition now. So I say we are putting Delaware on the world wine map, one medal at a time. And we have all kinds of awards and accolades. Most recently, we were named Best of Delaware last year. And probably one of my greatest moments in this entire history of Nassau Valley Vineyards was the opportunity to pour for Julia Child. This was actually the year before, this is the year I opened. And this event was in the United States Capitol. It's the only private event that was ever permitted to be held in the US Capitol House dining room. It was an event that was there for several years called Taste America. And it was really about the wine industry trying to bring to the mind of legislators that wine is an agricultural beverage and that we should not be under the auspice of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, where we are in terms of regulation. In fact, we should be governed by USDA. And we always had a guest chef. And the first year it was Julia Child. And she was so complimentary and amazing and delightful. And Representative Pat Schroeder from Colorado brought her to the table and said, Julia, I want you to meet Peg Raley. She's a young kid from Delaware, started this winery, and everybody told her she couldn't do it. And she had to change the law. And Julia said, oh, I'm so thrilled to try Delaware wine. Do you have a Chardonnay, dear? I said, yes, ma'am, of course I do. And
I love your impersonation.
But she was amazing. And she said, don't ever give up. Everyone told me I'd never be a chef, and look at me, and good for you, dear. And she was a hoot. So that's one of my greatest moments of the wine business. Yes, that's the Eiffel Tower. And that's there because in 2010, Nassau Valley Vineyards was one of only 3 wineries on the entire East Coast that was invited to the home of the United States Ambassador to France to present our wines to 600 members of the French wine trade. So we were there were a lot of California. Much as the French now recognize Bordeaux is not the only wine growing region in France, they've begun to realize that California is not the only wine growing region in the US. So this was an opportunity to present that to the French wine trade. That is former Ambassador Charles Rivkin coming up to the table. And what was really, really fun was he opened the event with our Pinot Grigio. Really pissed off the people from California, but he got a kick out of the story too. And he had actually, at this point, right when then President Obama had given him, had made him ambassador of France, he was the CEO of the Jim Henson Corporation. He's now Ambassador Rifkin is now the head of the motion picture industry.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So, but he was delightful. So we were very honored by that. This is our farmers market in a non-COVID world when everybody could be that close together. We have a lovely, as I told you, really fun farmers market, and we do beautiful weddings and events. So we do lots of them, small events, big events. You can have a wonderful time and make beautiful memories when you're at Nassau Valley Vineyards. And we hope you come visit us.
Well, Prime Time for Women's taking a field trip. So if you're interested, let me know. Yes. Peggy, I am so glad you joined us, especially with all that history as we're celebrating Women's History Month. It's such a great story. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Bernadette. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And
I have to say, I don't want to interrupt, but you're very inspiring. I'm just sitting here in awe of everything you've experienced. And it's kind of like the universe had your back, even though you had to work really hard at it, right? Like you came back to your roots and started something that people were saying, you're not allowed. Like, watch me, I'll make myself allowed. So you're a pioneer. I think a lot of us, business owners are women business owners, but wow, I'm so impressed, and I cannot wait. I have relatives not too far from you. I cannot wait to tell them about your winery. They may already know, but that was an incredible story. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Jane.
You're coming back again in a couple of weeks, right?
Yes, April 20th, I believe.
Yeah, so be sure to tune in. So thank you so much. And I can't say how much I'm looking forward to the field trip once we all get our vaccinations and we can join in on the fun.
I can't wait to have you all here. We will roll out the red carpet.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Jane Helm back to Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom. So Jane is back this time specifically going to talk about developing skills around communication that improve decision-making with your partner regarding finances. Trying to, and I did post your questions, and I have them again if you want me to pull them up. But Peggy, I was wondering if you could, you already stopped your screen share, right? So,
I did.
Okay, and Jane, do you have any screen share today? No?
Nope. People get to listen tonight.
Yes, yes. Well, and one of the best things, Jane, that you do such a great job is you're sharing information, but you do it in a way that you do it through stories. And one of the things that I've been really interested in since starting Prime Time for Women is the power of stories. And there's been a phenomenal amount of research about when women share stories, not just women, but when we share stories, it's actually processed differently in the brain than informational content. It's processed in the amygdala. And the idea that these stories elicit dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, all these chemicals that not only are good for our bodies, but these three chemicals combined create a sense of unity and a sense of compassion. And if there's ever a time in our world when we need unity and compassion, it's right now. So I always appreciate your style of sharing information as you relate it through stories and personal stories and clients that you've helped. So I am thrilled to turn this over to you today. And I do have some questions for you, but first I just wanted to give you a chance to welcome our guest.
Well, thank you so much. This is the third installment of me being part of this part of Prime Time for Women. And the people that have watched me before have heard some of my stories, but I'll interject a few this evening. I'm one that's very open about my story and about some of my client stories without breaking any confidentiality. Just so people that may not have heard me speak before, I am the founder of Money Mentor Group. We are a financial coaching group that was founded in Frederick, Maryland in 2015. And now we have two locations, one in Frederick and one here in South Carolina. I have two other people on my team, and we're all very, very passionate about helping people with their everyday money with compassion. Certainly, I had my own struggles with money. My husband and I did as well. And at that time, there was no one to help us. I talk about Googling the word financial, but back in my day, it was the Yellow Pages, right? That was my Google. And I looked under the word financial, and there were financial advisors saying, we're going to help you reach your goals. And I was in such a bad place with money. I was too ashamed to reach out to any of them. So
you shared before that you were didn't even know where to begin,
right.
And that once you got a grip on all those things, led you to this new career, which is pretty amazing. So just go back and give us the short version of how you got from there to where you are today.
So from there, let's talk about my rock bottom. Okay, we'll just start with rock bottom, which was 50,000 plus in credit card debt. And leading up to the 50,000, I was spending, making up for some emotions I hadn't processed in my money story, and robbing Peter to pay Paul. I really was.
And your husband didn't know all these things, right?
I'm sorry?
And your husband wasn't aware of all this.
Oh, no. If he knew, I mean, my God, what would happen, right? Like, he knew we were living a nice lifestyle, but he just figured I was figuring it all out,
right?
Because I was the money manager. And at that point, I couldn't sleep at night. I was busy doing math in my head, adding in paychecks. I'm sorry?
Was it impacting your health?
Oh my gosh, I wasn't sleeping. I was doing math. I was adding in a paycheck and subtracting out each bill for the week. So I was laying awake at night. I wasn't eating right, that's for sure. Stress eating. I was drinking more because that, masking the emotions I was feeling. And I wasn't a good mom. And that was my goal, to be the best mom ever. But I had a very short fuse, because if I got a bill in the mail, it affected me so badly that I was unpredictable as a mom. I feel really sorry for my kids when they were young. I finally had to come clean to my husband. I didn't have a choice. This is after I Googled the word financial and couldn't go sneak and meet with anybody. So we started from ground zero, below zero. And it's a really good thing, Bernadette, that I wasn't that savvy about money, because if I had thought about the $50,000 in credit card debt and then the interest on top of it, I didn't even think about that part, right? But if I had, I'm not sure I would have even started on this journey. Kind of like Peggy, the universe had my back as well, because I got offered a job in financial services. An advisor needed an assistant, and it was paying pretty well, and it was in Frederick where I lived and didn't have to commute on 270 for those people familiar with that commute. So I thought, what the heck, right? I'll go work for this guy. Well, it turned into a career for me that lasted over 15 years. I got licensed in securities and life and health and learned how money worked. But
also got your degree in psychology, which helped, right?
My degree in psychology and social work came into play in that role. I didn't expect it to, but as I observed clients and had conversations with clients, the whole behavior part started really being my passion. I took behavioral finance classes and attended everything I could, every journal I could read about it. Got formally certified as a financial coach ultimately, because as I was sitting with clients, it didn't matter how much money they were making, because some of them were just spending more than they made anyway. And that's still true today with a lot of my clients. I've had clients come to me that are doctors, that are dentists, that are making huge amounts of money, in excess of $900,000. But what's happened is, as their income has gone up, their behavior has changed. So they've dialed up their choices. They now fly first class, or they have to stay in the best resort because they deserve it, right? So it's not about how much you make, it's about the decisions you make around it. And I absolutely get energized even talking about what I do.
We can see that. We can see that.
I may need a glass of wine after this, because
I brought mine tonight.
Well, good for you. But what I do is help people learn how to make financial decisions based on their values, based on their numbers, of course. But until we get their beliefs and behaviors in line, anything I do isn't going to stick. So I take a really strong approach to the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors before I do the numbers.
Right. And you, in last week's, or a couple of weeks ago, you did a presentation on creating a purposeful, and you didn't use the word budget because you said that was like a yucky word. People don't like that.
Well, it's like a diet. Who wants to go on a diet? Who wants to be on a budget? Like, whoa,
right.
Unless you own a business. Now, owning a business, I do own a business. I have my overhead. I know what those numbers are, but nobody likes the word budget. It doesn't budge.
You changed that, and it's sort of like that's what I was talking about, the power of the stories we tell ourselves. And you change that, and you call it a purposeful savings and spending plan. And I just love that. And I thought, when we had a lot of people participation that week, and the feedback was great. So it is really fun to me tonight to be able to ask you about this other topic. It's related, but how you create harmony around money with your partner and the financial decisions. And I wanted to start off by asking you, why is the topic of money such a hot topic in relationships?
Well, it is a flashpoint in marriages and with significant others and business partners, right? But I think the reason, and it's something I touched on probably both of the last times I've been here, is it's the emotion we're bringing to money. And we have all grown up differently with money. We might have similar money stories, but the messaging we got around money as children and through our environment and through our culture, there's a lot of cultural beliefs around money. I've heard many of them, and it's really interesting depending on the culture that you grew up with. So And then what gender are you? Gender plays a role in how you think about money.
Right.
So when you combine all of these factors into your approach with money, it's going to be really hard to find somebody with those identical beliefs, those identical emotions, right?
But do you really want somebody that's just like you anyhow? No.
No. That's boring, right?
I'm just saying that would be boring.
Yeah. But when we're talking about our money, especially when we're combining it with a significant other,
Right.
then we have to find some common ground, right? So it's about finding the common ground from which to have as a platform, a springboard, if you will, into learning to create that harmony. So I always start with talking about how to talk about money.
Right. Yeah. And first of all, let me ask you, how do you define money harmony? I mean, that has to be a starting point.
I define money harmony as a symbiotic relationship where you feel very open to talk about any part of your money, whether it's saving, spending, or budgeting, where you can dream together and be heard and feel like your values are being heard. And then finding somebody, well, with your partner, that hears you, validates what you're saying, right?
Even if they don't agree with the
this is what I hear you saying, right? This is what I hear you saying about this decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? That's so important in any part of a relationship.
And you do know that in Prime Time for Women, one of our catchphrases is every woman deserves to be seen and heard. And so that's sort of like when you're talking about money harmony, each person in the relationship, regardless of whether they are ultimately going to agree, they deserve to be seen and heard around their money matters.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a skill. Yeah. I think if you can do it with money, you can do it with anything, by the way. I always say if we can get the money part straight, the sex gets a lot better. You say that. If we're talking about marriage and money, right? I'm just going to say, that's a nice side effect. So
what is the number one source of financial conflict with partners?
I'm going to say that we know from, the Wall Street Journal did a survey. So 73% of all divorces is over money conflict. But only 25% of those 73% cited income, a lack of income as the reason. Okay. There are people that are qualified for the earned income credit. Okay. So that's a very low income, but they have money harmony because they're on the same page. It's not about the income. It's more about power struggles, spending habits, right? That's a biggie. Right? That spending, that one person, I always say opposites attract. And I talked about money personalities previously. So we have a spender that's married to a hoarder, right? The spender is impulsive and they love spending money on themselves and others. And then they're married to somebody that's like, I don't want to let go of my money. I want it under the mattress. What are you doing? They both think each other is a pain in the butt. Like, I cannot believe you keep spending, and you're looking at the spouse going, I can't believe you want to save all this for what, right? Opposites do attract with money. They really do. And it's about communication tools. So I think one of the tools that if you've, I was going to do a little survey of how many people talked about money before they got into a relationship with their significant other. My husband and I did not, because we were in love and everything was just going to work out because we were in love. But this was a great guy. He is a great guy. He stuck with me through this rock bottom. We're going to have our 35th wedding anniversary in May. And I just said to him yesterday, boy, has it been ups and downs, right? Like we've had the roller coaster.
But that's what life is, Jane, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But when you hear that 73% of all divorces is money related, right? I told him that night that I came clean. You can divorce me. This is my issue. I will pay it off somehow. and it was very scary to say it. It's the only time I think I've used the D word in 35 years. And for some reason, he stuck with me. I'm not sure if the situation was reversed, I would have had that grace or that future vision that, yes, we can do this.
So, Peggy, how about you? Did you guys talk about money before you got married?
No.
No.
No. I mean, not on that level. Certainly as our relationship got more serious, or, you know, when it looked like it was going that way, we did. My husband was previously married. I mean, we've been together 16 years. We've been married 10 years next month. But, you know, and he was originally from here and moved back here. So he was working in the film industry at the time. He's a producer. So, you know, we both just sort of agreed that we were coming into this at such an age and a point in our own lives that, you know, as he's fond of saying in one phrase, it all ultimately comes from the same pocket, doesn't it? But I still have a separate checking account of my own, aside from what we have together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think that's
my husband.
He's retired now. And so he no longer does, because he got rid of his business account. Right. But I don't know what it is. I'm not going to let go of that. And
it's funny for me, I've known my husband since we were 12. We met in 7th grade, and we didn't really start dating until our senior year of high school. And we both went to different colleges, so dated other people. But there was, growing up, I knew his family, he knew my family. I think in some ways our families had similar money experiences. I was one of 9, he was one of 6, and big families, and everybody saved all the time because that's what you did. So I feel like overall, there's only been like, I can only really think of one really big bump about money, and it was painful, painful. So I give you so much credit, Jane, to be able to have that conversation. And I'm going to give your husband a big fat shout out.
Yeah, he deserves it. You know, when I look back to that night, it was one night I put the girls to bed, and I had
How old were your girls at this time?
6 and 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had legal pads. I had calculators and several boxes of tissues out, right? Like, it was a really tough night. And again, I struggled in math in school. I was one of those kids that kind of didn't have the foundational math skills that you grow up with. I got left behind at long division. And if you're left behind at long division, algebra makes no sense whatsoever. Word problems make no sense. Like, I was one of those kids that got pushed along through math, and even in college took math 100 and had to ask for help after every class. Like the professor would say, Jane, are you staying after today? Like and now I have a career where I do formulas and math all the time. It's just kind of interesting, right?
And, you know, that's one of the things I love about your story is this constant evolution. As women, we are not stuck. I get so sick of people saying you're over the hill, this is the end of the world, or, you know, you're on the decline. That's just total nonsense. Never mind, nonsense.
I wanted to say something that Peggy...
But I love that you continue to evolve. And not only that, in your role, you take other women and say to them, I believe in your evolution. And that's one of the powers of Prime Time for Women. Together, we truly are healthier, happier, and stronger. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I was wondering, I know you have a little document, and I actually posted it before tonight's meeting, because I really wanted to give you a chance to review that with Prime Time for Women.
Okay. So this is a quiz that you posted, and it's a way of kind of self-evaluating where your relationship is in terms of money communication with a significant other. And there's 10 questions, yes or no, right? And if you,
I brought a pen.
You have a pen, are we going to go over each one of them? Are we going to
just read it real quickly, because I think it might help for people who watch this recording later.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So the first question is, do you plan together do you plan written personal goals together that will help increase your net worth by 10 to 15% annually?
Okay, go ahead.
So net worth is an interesting way to look at your finances. Is it going up or down? Right? That's just a litmus test. And net worth is simply your assets minus your liabilities, right? So what can we do as a team in terms of our net worth? We don't want it to go down, right? But maybe we can just keep it where it is. Maybe that's a goal, right? But that's a conversation you could have, like, hey, let's look at our net worth. Easy, breezy. Look at your value of your assets minus your liabilities and try to work as a team to work in a positive direction.
I have to say, I love that you do the team approach. You know, I think that is one of those things that changes the mindset, as opposed to his spending, her spending, or a team.
But I want to speak to what Peggy said about having her own account. Mm-hmm. I think that's huge as far as independence, and for women especially. I always advocate for that, because when I grew up, my mom didn't have her own account, nor did she feel like she needed one. But as women, and especially a business owner, and a lot of us are now, right? I want to be able to have my money that I don't have to justify what I'm spending it on, right? I'm not asking for more. I have a certain amount in my spending plan, by the way, Bernadette, that gets deposited automatically into my freedom account, right? To do whatever I want. So I think it's important that both spouses can have that. I know couples that do that.
And I will say, until I started Prime Time for Women a number of years ago, I never really had my own account. And it feels both empowering and a little scary.
Sure.
Like my husband's doing the taxes, and he says, you need to get that tax stuff together. I'm like, you used to do all that. So now it's like, So anyhow.
Got a good CPA, they'll help you. The next is, we evaluate our game plan periodically. We have getaway weekends, or at least evenings, every 3 to 4 months. So that's another way of creating that harmony, is having a game plan for how we're going to keep this harmony going, right? It doesn't always have to be about, I think if we can create a relationship where we have a game plan on, like, you know, travel when we used to be able to, but even if you don't, finding some common ground on interests, or exploring your husband's interests or your spouse's interests, can help build the foundation to keep money harmony or create more. So that goes into values. And I always think that if we can be feeding our values monetarily, right? In my spending plan, there's money going to what both my husband and I value. That's travel, that's spending time, family time, that's special, that we can make special, right? My husband loves to fish. Well, it's not one of my favorite things to do, but I'll go sit with him and keep him company. I won't talk too much or whatever. I'll read a book. But do you have a game plan for creating or maintaining that harmony?
Right. And I do think that beyond just the money, the idea of setting time aside for each other is crucial to relationships. And I would say that's also true for women in their prime with their adult children, to make time to spend time with their adult children, maybe with their parents. So many of us are in caregiver situations right now. But prioritizing time focused on the other is like an incredible healing environment.
It is. And if you're not talking about money, it's a way of creating a foundation from which to have that conversation.
And you know, Jane, you were talking about vacation. My husband's one of those people that like every quarter. He says, okay, where are we going next quarter? And he loves to do the planning. Every once in a while, I'll plan a vacation. But for him, it's especially when he was in a really tough ongoing medical practice, the idea that he was going to have a chance to get away and totally do something different was super, super important to him. And I can remember him saying, don't you want to pick the next place to go? And I can remember I picked Ireland and I did a lot of the planning that time. But most of the time for me, honestly, it's not so much where I go, it's who I go with. And I get to spend time with him away from his work. And that is important to me. So everybody's a little different, but I love the idea that you say, create this team approach. And I think having a plan is huge.
So if you're not talking about money, a good place to start, I'm just going to say right now, is to sit down and have that conversation about what's important to each other. Right. Getting clear on what each of you values and maybe some shared values. And then start talking about how can we fund this, right? We're not talking about arguing over bills. We're not talking about, anything like that, but let's make sure we're doing these things that bring us joy, So that's a good place to start.
Perfect.
The next question or indicator, yes, no, we talk openly and have developed open and honest communication about money. Now, this could be an advanced stage of money harmony, right? If you don't have it now, that seems rather lofty, right? Like, what is she, crazy? If I wouldn't be taking this thing, I wouldn't even be doing this evaluation if that's where I was, right? But I think it's just a goal. It's a goal for all of us. And I'm a financial coach. My husband and I have been through a lot of different financial scenarios, I'll say. Certainly when I decided to start this company and leave a job that was very lucrative, lots of perks, lots of vacation, and great salary, right? We had to have talks about what that was going to look like and plan ahead for it. And, so we've had a lot of journeys with money, but we have found it's better just to be honest. My husband had to be honest with me several months ago about a money issue, and he was stressing, and I knew something was wrong. I know him well enough. And then when he told me, he goes, I feel so much better. Like, don't hold this stuff back. Like, after what I've done, you've got points, man. Like, so it's hard to maintain, but I think the more often that we can have these discussions about what's going on with our money, is it moving in the right direction? Is there anything that you want to get off your chest, right?
Just having somebody ask you that is a big deal. Peggy, as a business owner, and I mean, your winery has the event side of it, you have the farmer's market side of it, you have the vineyard, you have the tasting room. How does that, is your husband part of that business, or is that all you?
No, and honestly, I think I'd kill him if he was here.
That Jane loves honesty, don't you, Jane?
Hey, she has boundaries, though, and that's a boundary. It's a business. My husband has no involvement in my business other than to be my cheerleader, right? And that's great. But there is no way I would even want him in my profit and loss, my balance sheet, my business checking account. I'm accountable to other people in the business, but no, he's, I think it's important to have boundaries too.
Yeah, exactly. And that has been, for us, that's actually been, it's not been difficult, but it's a thing that has come up as he has really gone into retirement from the film and video world. His field was so specialized in what he's done in the last 35 years was so specialized. Even if he wanted to go find something to do part-time, it's not something he can do. So every once in a while he'll say, why don't you let me come out there with you? This, that, let me take a hold of that. And I say, absolutely not.
Yeah.
My father and I were always at each other only because we're both incredibly strong-willed, and he passed 7 years ago. He had a good run. It's okay. But to go back into that kind of antagonistic with two people who are incredibly strong-willed and say, this is the way it has to be done. I tell them, you know, honey, if you want the marriage to continue, then.
All right, I appreciate that.
It's true.
That's so funny. With me in Prime Time for Women, my husband is my cheerleader, but he's not really interested in the business end of it. He's like, he's looking to cut his practice down and not take something else on. So yeah. It's interesting. So Jane, what is the next quiz question?
It's not a problem for us to compromise. We mutually agreed that there's a limit on the amount of money we can spend. Now, I want to just preface what I'm going to say. It's not only about spending. We make financial decisions as far as saving, keeping within that personal saving and spending plan, right? But I think compromise is a huge, learning to compromise is a huge skill in any part of a relationship. I had a client this morning, he's 24, God bless him. And he was home visiting his parents over spring break, and we had to talk about compromise, right? His parents had expectations of what he was going to do with his time, and then he had some. So compromise in any relationship, again, taking what the other person is suggesting or talking about, validating what you've heard, and then say, let's circle back around to that. I need some time to think about it, right? We don't always have to
look for that win-win, right?
I always look for a win-win. I do it in business. I do it with my clients. And I think in most of my relationships, that's my outlook. How can we make this a win-win?
Default strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So compromise, you know, we're not always going to get our way with the money, right? Especially when we're sharing it. It's not all up to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The next one is we exercise self-discipline and delay immediate gratification. So if, like Peggy, you have your own account, mm-hmm. then she can have that instant gratification if she wants without any kind of effect on the marital assets, right? Yeah. But if you don't have your own account, then it's time to pause over some of these decisions until it's been thought out or agreed upon about what those boundaries are. And Peggy, are you saying you got to go?
No, I'm hoping I'm going to hang with you. My battery is.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to say how lovely it's been getting.
But I'm watching it and it's slowly descending. And I went out without my charger. So I'm with you now, but if I just suddenly disappear, that's why.
Okay. Didn't know if you had to go, but I wanted to thank you for your inspiring story.
Well, you're fascinating, and I just want to keep listening, and I want to talk to you more. If I go poof, it's
not personal.
It's not personal. My battery's not. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't normally lose battery this fast.
So delaying gratification, it's a skill. I call it pausing around financial decisions. If it isn't paying your overhead or your fixed bills, if it's something that takes some thought, then take the time to think it through. Run it by your partner, right? And both of you pause. I think pausing is one of the biggest money management skills you can practice. You know, it's hard to do sometimes. We're in a very realistic world, a world where we're being marketed to all the time. So it breeds impulsiveness, right? These marketers have psychologists on their staff because they know how to play with our emotions. So pausing, most decisions financially, you don't have to make in a moment unless you're in an emergency. That whole decision-making process is different in an emergency, right? You got to make a decision now, but most of our decisions warrant some time and warrant some pausing.
I do know that when my kids were little, I had this rule. If we were shopping and they wanted something, I would say, okay, write it down and we'll come back and see if you want it in a week. And the idea was that, you know, it wasn't an impulse buy. It was something that they would want. And as they got older, I can remember, and they had their own money. I used to say to them, I'll put 50% into anything you want to buy. And they're like, oh, well, how about if you just buy me all of this and none of that? I said, no. If it's important enough to you, you put some skin in the game and I'll match you, whatever it is you want. And I have to say, my kids are good savers because they learned early to really think about each purchase. And my favorite thing is I have twin daughters, and I'm like a huge consignment shopper. My furniture, I love used things. I like repurposing things. And I buy a lot of my clothes consignment shop. And I can remember saying to my twins, you can have this much money for back to school clothes. And my one daughter went to the consignment shop and she got like 6 pairs of pants. And then Beth went and we went to Macy's and she bought 1 pair of pants. And it was very interesting to watch them come up with different strategies to deal with different money spending things. So they grew up the same house at the same time, but they had their own approach. And neither one was wrong, but it was just really fun to watch that.
So as siblings raised by the same parents, we all still have a different perception about money, right? Yes. And we bring different emotions. It's so interesting. The money story is a great place to start talking about money because you're finding out more about your spouse that you might not have known, right? Tell me what you remember growing up around money. What sayings did your parents say to you all the time? This is what my parents said. What do you remember about how they managed money, right? That is a good entree into how you deal with money today, right? So that's a non-combative way to start the approach with talking about money if you've never done so. The values, again, that's another tip. Like, where should we be directing our money? What's a priority for you? Besides having a roof over our head and food and the utilities on, what is a priority here?
Right.
So what brings quality of life to both of you?
Great.
The other one of them is we are proactive, responsible adults. Is that how you would describe yourself? Are you proactive, responsible adult? Because if there's anything that's kind of shaky there, it could have to do with money decisions. Maybe you're not being proactive and looking at your plan and what our cash flow really is. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're overspending and then trying to figure out in the rearview mirror how you're going to handle it, right? So being proactive. We live below our means. That's a big one, right? And not easy to do in this materialistic world. And I think, Bernadette, some of the lessons you taught your kids are so interesting because we are helping to create our children's money story, right? They're watching, they're listening, they're looking at how you made decisions around spending on them, right? Like, I'll put in 50%, but you're going to have to put in 50% too.
Well,
right?
That was sort of my way of not saying it was a bad purchase.
Sure.
But if it was a good enough purchase for them, then they had to have, some. And I do think that there's a lot of things that they bought that they didn't really want.
Hello, we're in America. We all do that.
Right. So there was no, on my part, I didn't go back and say, told you so.
No.
You know what I mean? It was like.
They realized it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The next one, we pay ourselves first, whereby we are able to fund monthly all of our financial goals and the bills we have. So, maybe one of you really believes in paying yourself first and making sure we're putting that money in savings. But if you're with a spender, that's where it's going to be a little harder to have that conversation around the boundaries, right? So we can approach it kind of tiptoe in, like, okay, let's talk about one area of spending that may not be so painful to stop or to dial back. I always talk about dialing things up and back, depending on what's going on. But if you are living below your means, you're both on the same page already, right? Each of us is knowledgeable about both personal and business finances of our partner. Well, you heard Peggy and me say, first of all, my husband wouldn't understand the business accounting. I didn't understand it when I first started the business and I was going over these reports. I'm like, what? I just knew it was in the business checking. But when I had a bookkeeper saying, well, this is your balance sheet and this is what this number means, I'm like, where'd you get that number? That number, like, it took me a while. He is, he is not interested. He's just not interested. If he wanted to see it, I would show it to him, but he has no interest. But I think when it comes to the personal finances, for both of you to have access to the accounts, to log in whenever you want. And I think it's also important, my business partner, Karen, talked about her experience with losing her husband in her 50s, early 50s, right? To know how to access these accounts. It's your right and responsibility to be able to access every financial account that you have.
Yeah, I love that you say it's not just your right, but it is a responsibility. And I think that's something that message resonates with me, that I need to do a better job of that.
I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to check back in with you on that. I'll circle back around on that, Bernadette. That's what us coaches do. We circle back around.
In some ways, because my husband and I are on the same page, and he has a greater interest in this area, it's been easier for me to sort of abdicate. I don't know if that's the right word, but I hear what you're saying, and it's not just my right, it's my responsibility. And and Karen did touch on that a little bit. So I appreciate you saying right and responsibility. And I would say that's probably important for every single woman.
Every woman and every man. My husband should know how to log in too. Like, both of us know how to log into the investments, know how to log into the bank, know how to log into the credit cards. Not just if something happens, but what if you're trying to make a decision and you don't have all the information, right? Knowledge is power. So
knowledge is power.
Yep. There's some other tips, if you don't mind me sharing, or do you have another question?
No, that's good.
Okay. So I think it's important to know that you can agree to disagree, right? We're not always going to feel like, oh, what he wants to spend money on makes sense to me. Again, we tend to say, make sure we repeat back so we're hearing it correctly, and then circle back around after a few days. We give ourselves a few days. There have been times we've disagreed, but I'll say, okay, let's do what your idea is, right? And just see how it works out, but agree that you're not always gonna agree, right? I think,
especially since you were saying in the beginning, you're creating opportunities for you to come back and talk about those areas.
Oh yeah. You know, and he knows one of my values, one of the things I like to do is do mixed media art. So I take all kinds of materials from the house and I cover the dining room table with newspaper and paint and all kinds of stuff and make a mess. But he'll sit with me, or he'll say, oh, what about that color? You know, so he's gotten involved in some of what I like to do too. And it just builds that foundation.
And you're gone fishing sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And he'll come with me when I take my pictures early in the morning at the beach when he, you know, he doesn't have to be up for work. Yeah. So yeah, we do try to work on the foundation. I think also focusing on what strengths each of you bring to money management. Some people are very detail oriented. Your husband has done probably a great job with the finances, knows how to track them. But, you know, somebody else might be more of a strategic thinker.
So it's funny that you say that. For the first 37 years we were married, I did all the monthly bills. I managed all that. It was like coming in, going out. Mm-hmm. I didn't handle any of the investments. I wasn't even really particularly interested in it. It's like right. Far down the road. But what I'm hearing you say tonight, what's really resonating with me is that I have a right to know that, and that right has always been there, but I have not accepted the responsibility.
Correct.
I appreciate you saying that. It's putting a little bit different perspective on it for me. So thank you.
And, you know, you may have a lot of questions because this has been something you've kind of delegated to him. Yeah, and
I haven't spent the time to learn it, right?
It's never too late, Bernadette.
I know. Thank you, Jane. That's why you're here.
And I think when we think about talking about money, let's not forget, let's talk about how we're earning it, right? Not just how we're spending it. Have a different perspective, like, okay, this is how I'm bringing money into the household. This is what I do all day. This is, I think we're so focused on who's spending what and where the money's going, but are we talking about how we're earning it, right? So that's another, maybe you want to earn money in a different way. Maybe you're considering a career change. Maybe you need to do some research around that, but talk about how you're bringing the money into the household. Just don't focus on what's going out. Having conversations around, well, what if your significant other makes significantly more than you do and you're feeling kind of dependent on them, right? That can be kind of uncomfortable, kind of brings up some insecurities. And if you're feeling that way, then I think that's a conversation to have. Or, how can you support somebody in their career so that they can keep bringing in the money, right? My husband just recently, we moved, he got a new job. He's kind of starting over with a career he used to have. So we've been really working on supporting him in that starting over phase. And that has to do with money, right? It isn't always what we're spend. And then when we talk about money, because we bring so many emotions to it, we start feeling very vulnerable. I always say people would rather talk about their sex life than talk about their money. It's easier for people, right? And that's not always easy. So if you're feeling vulnerable, that's completely normal. And I would say look for red flags during a money talk where you have to say, look, time out. I need to take a time out, right?
Is it true that if you're hesitant to talk about something, that's something you should talk about?
Absolutely. We know that if we're having trouble, if you're getting a weird feeling in your stomach or the butterflies or the heart rate, or you can't catch your breath because this is a difficult topic, that's all the more reason you need to talk about it, right? It's creating anxiety in you and you're not even sharing the anxiety, right? Like now it's on your shoulders and in your heart and and it's affecting your health.
One of the things I did want to make sure that I asked you is, and this was something that you told me that you wanted to talk about, was what can women do to find their voice in the financial decision making? I mean, you got some specific things about that, right?
I think to find your voice is understanding what you value, right? Being very clear, getting really clear on what you value. What are your values?
That's a little bit of inside work before you.
It's a lot of inside work, yeah. So start with that. Mm-hmm. Talking about what you value and how you want a priority to go towards what that is. Right? That is finding your voice, sticking up for yourself, sticking up for what is going to bring you joy. That is such a great way to find your voice. Then we can go into other topics around money with that as the lead in, right? Having a vision.
That's beautiful.
Creating a vision for your life, talking about your vision, your values will help you find your voice.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying is creating a vision for your life enables you to create a shared vision with your partner. Right?
Perfectly said. Perfect.
Yeah.
Hashtag. That was good.
Yay.
You're such a good student.
Yeah, I'm taking those notes here. So I wanted to say that I think the quiz can be a source of a framework for people. So I hope that as our viewers watch this, that they take the time to really give that some thought. And I'm going to put your contact information and Money Mentor group in the chat. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to share with us today, specifically on this topic.
I think that no matter where you are in your conversations around money, whether they're non-existent, right? Let's start with that. Again, make it not about numbers first, because again, but we all bring so much emotion to those numbers, the fear, the scarcity, the abundance, right? There's all kinds of different emotions around the numbers. But if we can start with the money story, what we have for our vision for the future, our values, that is the best foundation. Then move on to some of the numbers and maybe about earning money and net worth rather than going to, you know, creating our spending plan, right? That's kind of either hire a coach to help you talk through that, right?
Right.
Or make that one of the last steps, but learn about talking about it is the first step.
Right. Jane, is it all right if I include your website link?
Oh, please.
Too?
Yes, absolutely. It's www.moneymentorgroup.com.
Yeah, I'm just pasting that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Well, I think that you're speaking wisdom that can provide clarity for a lot of people, not just women, but women and their partners and the women and men that are important in their lives. So thank you so much for being a part of Prime Time for Women's Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom.
Well, Bernadette, all 3 sessions have been an absolute pleasure, especially during Women's History Month. And
I know, and you're making history.
Yes, we are history makers, right?
That's right.
So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I wish Prime Time for Women all the best.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.